Today's class for horror sci-fi movies is vampires. Welcome to horror sci-fi films online class number 2. Yeah. Okay, I really can't teach this. How? Gross. Yeah, you can't really talk with those things in. Yes, today's class for horror sci-fi is vampires. Ah, I pressed the button. Also got to put on the glasses. Ruins the whole effect. Hello, class. We're back for class 2 of coronavirus stay-at-home online class. I got my teacher's assistant here. Hold on, here. Teacher's assistant Zilla. Hello. Say hello to the class. Godzilla the cat. Hello. Is he cute? Okay. It's Godzilla the cat. She helps me with all my everyday work, especially now that I'm stuck at home. Oh, remember this. The CDC has said that you have to wash your hands frequently. So, I'm always washing my hands. There we go. It's supposed to be like 20 seconds each hand. I have a whole box of these. So, yeah, the jokes don't get any better than this. It's all dad jokes from here out. Okay, so today's class is vampires. Get my notes up. So once again, just so you remember, for the class, I want you to watch this video, listen to all the wonderful things that I have to say, and at the end of it, and with the attached, you will see the questions that you have to answer after watching the film. And just to make sure that you guys are really watching this, and I'm just not wasting my time wandering around my house with monster makeup and stuff, I'm going to put 2 secret words in the video. And I want you to put those words at the top of your questions so I know you watched. Okay, today we're going to be talking about vampires, the living dead, Nosferatu, succubus, Lilu, the Indian Vitalis, the Hebrew Alukul, I'm probably mispronouncing that. Almost every culture has a version of a vampire, a creature that rises from the dead to drain the life of the living, to sustain the unnaturally long life. It's a perfect fictional creature to tell stories about lust, mortality, sex, death. Sex and death, the basis of all the great art and all the driving forces of life. Sex and death and food. What would be the consequences of living forever? What would your sacrifice be for such a privilege? How would that change you if you lived forever, only living at night, biting people you have to kill to live? You have to kill other human beings, not just animals. How would mortality change under these circumstances? If you lived forever, wouldn't that change how you think, how you do things? Remember, part of what makes us human is that we have a finite amount of time here on this earth. And in that time, you change. If you lived forever, what would happen? So those are some of the things you could think about while watching these films. By the way, today's class is a little bit different than the other class. I'm not going to actually just give you a movie to watch with a link. I'm going to give you a list of vampire movies that are all kind of within the ones that I know. And you can watch them. I'm sure you could find them for free online or on any streaming service that you have. So I'll give you a list at a certain point so you can just watch those. First off, allegories. What are vampires like? What are they talking about? Like most horror movies, it's not just talking about the monsters, it's talking about real, actual human life and things that are similar in the real world. First and foremost, vampires are allegories for psychosexual interplays, penetration, blood, loss of virginity, loss of innocence, bad relationships, sexually transmitted diseases, blood diseases, and a reflection of sexual taboos given in a society. Not too far of a thing. I mean, most vampire movies go for the romantic angle. The idea of somebody draining your life force. It's not too much to go out of the way to say, penetration, neck, blood, get it, virginity. Bleh. You can see why the Victorians really thought this was bawdy and cool, because, they were very making believe that nobody had sex back in the Victorian days. Obviously, if they didn't, we wouldn't be here. But anyway. Skull Club. Like when Dracula was first put out, it was put out on Valentine's Day. It was thought of as a romantic film. Definitely, vampires have this allure to them. Come with me, I'll let you live forever. The idea of you becoming my bride and that kind of power play between people. Not that I'm going to get into it, but those Twilight movies. I don't want you watching those. They're terrible. And I don't want to hear about them because they're boring. You know what? This is how far I go for you people. I actually watched those movies when they came out because I needed to understand what everybody was going off on. And they're terrible. You have to ask yourself why so many teen girls find this girlish, sparkly, sexually non-threatening Edward guy hot. What does a tween want? Somebody not threatening. Somebody who doesn't want, I don't want to bite you. Get it? Bite you? Bite, sex, get it? It's really that kind of a thing. Why tween girls would find this amazing. Don't want to get into the whole thing about Edward being, a few hundred years old, so he's basically a child molester. And also, hey, I'm Team Jacob, really. Werewolf is really what's going to happen. I mean, think about that kind of Beauty and the Beast thing. I mean, if you're have heterosexual tendencies and you are looking at a guy, that's what you're going to get. Guys are hairy and gross. Ugh, we're not sparkly. Sorry, girls. That's what you get. If you look at Beauty and the Beast and that fable, that says the same thing. That kind of weird sexuality play with beasts and gentlemen. So there's that. Also, I mean, on that note, another allegory. Not to go off on too much of a tangent. Animal nature allegories. Vampires who suck blood to live are like animals. There are plenty of animals in nature that suck blood to live. Excuse me. Animals that drink blood, like vampire bats, leeches, mosquitoes, plants, Venus flytraps. They eat flies. They lure them in and eat them. They drink their blood. Lots of things live off of blood. Landlords, politicians. War against class. Dracula. Hopefully, I guess all of you know or have an idea what Dracula is, and the story of Dracula. He's a rich nobleman that's draining, the lower classes. What do noblemen do? They drink the blood. They take your money, your taxes, your land. That's definitely a European thing. So that's the thing. It's that old world attacking the new. Most of the time with vampire myths, it's like, oh, that's old superstition. That's something the old timers think of. Well, they're coming from the old world to take from the new world. That's very much a part of the storyline. It can also be thought of as a scare tactics or a scare allegory for foreign influences. Think about it. Dracula comes from Wallachia, from Transylvania, right? He's going to come to England to take their women. They're women, and their blood and infect them. I always thought, when you read the Book of Dracula, it's obvious he's coming to England because that's the seat of power in the New World. Strangely, America wasn't a power in the New World at that point. So that type of a thing of, it's the foreigners. It's always the foreigners, Ask Trump. They always want to. You always want to vilify the people from the other tribe. That always makes you look cool. It could also be about the old controlling the new, the older controlling the young. Think about it. The vampires that are hundreds of years old coming to get youth. What do old people do? They want to control the youth. That's just human nature. Your parents want to control you, probably for good reason, sometimes for not so good reasons. So, there's always that kind of thing. So the old always want to control the young. The old ideas that are set in their ways, their old ways of doing things, their systems always are challenged by something new, and they don't want to give it up. Vampires can be a study of what it is, how time changes a person. Think about that. Are you the same person you are when you were 10, when you were 15? Will you be the same person when you're 30, 40, 50? Well, think of that times however long a vampire lives. Are you the same person in 100 years, 200 years, or if you're infinite, you never die? Are you always doing the same thing? Are you not doing the same thing? It talks about life. Obviously, vampires don't actually exist, but you do. So think about how you act in time, and then take that to the next step of what would happen. It's almost even like a time travel kind of thing. But maybe I'll do a time travel day at some point. There's the allegory of drug addiction. Vampires have to feed. They need that. They can't stop. They can't stop themselves from drinking blood and killing others, like a junkie. And if they don't get their blood, they become gone. They start getting sick. They need that thing. Definitely, blood disease allegories. AIDS. Think of that. That's a not to say anything bad about people with AIDS, but it's something that is transmitted through bodily fluids and attacks a system. So that's something too, and that definitely comes up when you look at something like Interview with a Vampire, which I'll get to. Allegories of bad relationships. Who hasn't been in a relationship with somebody who is draining to them, who is not good for you? Have you been in love with somebody and they're just rotten people and it makes you sick and makes you sad and whatever? Or maybe you're that person who does horrible things to other people and makes them sad and terrible. It's all. Horror movies are not just about the monster. It's about real life, like we've been learning this entire semester. Religions. Dracula, lacrosse. They're gonna. Why are they afraid of crosses and stuff like that? Maybe it's because that is the show of God, and that's a fear of God, or it's they're doing something, they're evil, they're going something against norms that are put forth by a church or something like that. That's a European thing, or Anglo-Saxon Christian religion type of allegory. Vampires tend to be artistically gothic. And when I say gothic, they have a certain look. Gothic look harkens back to 21st century paintings. Back when, it was any art or any kind of things being made were made by the church, or at least in the European sense. And so that's, very dark colors. They definitely have a color palette of black, white, red, purple, and green. It has muted colors, but it's usually black and white, very, stark colors like that. Lots of shadows are used in the palette of what it looks like, the art direction. It also mixes very well with the German Expressionism, which we've all been taught about when I was talking about Nosferatu and that other stuff that I showed you. So that really works great for vampire stuff. I mean, unless you're going for a more modern thing where they're trying to do something very bright with it, but it's always ends up being that gothic thing, and it's also gothic themed, where the monster is up on a hill. It's not. Rarely do you get vampires in the suburbs. Well, Fright Night they do. Blood. That's how I stay young. They have that kind of gothic look to them. There's those old tropes of the old dark castle and the foggy moors and, the far off distant land, and you're going to find some sort of monster out there. And that kind of vampire really hits on a lot of the films. Just on a side note, or, because I like to tell you about music and other artistic styles that to kind of go with the movies that we're watching. In the late 70s, into the 80s, into the 90s, there was an artistic movement called goth, which definitely kind of went with vampire stuff. It was this artistic movement in music and art, and there were a lot of bands and music about vampires, and vampire romance books started with Anne Rice, who made the Vampire Chronicles. Oddly enough, coinciding with the AIDS epidemic, so blood, vampires, and this kind of revulsion, draw to alternative lifestyles, both, that kind of weird dichotomy of things kind of working with and against each other. There was a thriving goth club scene. Any big city, definitely in New York, people would dress up in black and wear white makeup and smoke clove cigarettes. Go see a lot of bands. A lot of bands that used to be punk kind of moved into that genre. Bands like The Damned, Concrete Blonde, Bauhaus. I got some links over there. You can check them out. You'll dig it. And actually, it was kind of like the first cosplay thing. You would go to these clubs, and there would be people, you'd be listening to this really interesting techno kind of pre-shoegaze music. I don't know if anybody understands what I'm talking about when I talk about these kind of musical movements. And people put in fake vampire teeth and, dress in black and wear capes and stuff. It was kind of like just this wonderful freak show. And this was really big. They had these dance clubs in, definitely New York, New Orleans, L.A., Britain, and London. You can still find them today. I think I got a friend of mine who runs one of them. I think it's called Necromantics. You might want to check them out online. They have a couple of, if you're old enough to go to a club, and if we ever get to go to a club ever again, if we ever get to leave our homes, go to a golf club. You might enjoy it. Vampire rules. Now, as I go through these, I want you to think back to the allegories and the similes and the themes of what we just talked about, and see how they kind of, work with those ideas. They all vary in different fiction, because this is all made up, so it's nothing's set in stone. So it always has to happen this way because it's all made up stuff. Well, definitely one thing is they drink blood. Sometimes they say psychic vampire, where they drain you of your psychic abilities or of your life force. But usually it's actual blood, They bite you, blood comes out, they drink your blood. They drink the blood to survive and stay young almost indefinitely. Vampires stay out of the daylight in most of these fictions. Another interesting thing is they have to be invited in. So if a vampire comes to your door, you have to let them in of your own free will, and then they get you. If that's not an allegory for a bad relationship, I don't know what is. You have to let them in to let them do horrible things to you. We all do that. There. Yeah, I dropped my glasses. And my cross. They must return to their coffin or the soil that they were buried in during the day. So automatically they're outsiders. They have to be, they're awake when you're asleep. as a nighttime person, there's a different, there's a different world out there. Back in the days when my day started at 4 in the afternoon and then worked all night, I used to work very late at night in nightclubs and whatnot. It's a very different world in that dark. And it's an interesting place to be. It's quiet. It's getting off into a different world. But that's another kind of thing to think about. A cross or other religious icons can repel them. Garlic repels them. In reality, garlic is very good for your blood. If you've got a cold, eating a big chunk of garlic, very good for you. So vampires have a hard time in Italy. Strangely enough, the island of Santorini, which is off the coast of Italy, is some of the earliest vampire legends from Greece and Rome come from there, because it's a hollowed out dead volcano and lots of bats live on that island. Things that can kill a vampire. Holy water will burn them. Sunlight can kill them. A wooden stake or an iron stake through the heart or decapitation will kill them, but who wouldn't that kill? Vampires cast no reflection. Must be really tough to comb your hair and do your makeup. Vampires can control or shapeshift animals. They can control animals or shapeshift into animals. Most likely bats or wolves. Kind of skirts the edge of werewolf on some of that, but that's a different thing and a different class, actually. There's a lot of legends of things that drain your blood. And actually, a lot of Asian demons do that, and where they change into animals and drain your blood. Yobaki? I think that's the Japanese one. I'll look that up. The vampire cape, strangely enough, it's not mentioned in Dracula, and vampires don't wear a cape. It's kind of a cool stage device because it makes you look like a bat. But it actually comes from the play of Dracula, which was very popular in the late 1800s, which is what most of the films were made with. And definitely Lugosi rocks the cape in the 1933 Dracula. That was done because the person playing Dracula was a magician, and he could hide tricks with the cape. So, and that kind of just kept going. There's scenes in movies where somebody gets bitten by a vampire and they just put on a cape, which is stupid. It's like some haberdasher comes and gives you a jacket. Doesn't make any sense. That's where the cape comes from. The legend of vampires, as far as not so much North America, although there was a lot of cases in North America back in the witch trial days that they thought they were actual vampires, and definitely in Europe, where back when superstition was more prevalent than science, and when they didn't know we talked about this before with zombies, where if people go into a coma and they think they're dead, and then all of a sudden they wake up, it's a vampire, or if somebody gets buried alive. That was a big concern in the olden days. So if somebody was buried and whatever, they open the crypt later and they find them and their body is like this. There's certain conditions also when a dead body just doesn't rot. Olden time people before science didn't understand this. And they were like, wait, it's still alive. It must be a vampire. Also didn't understand about infectious diseases. We're dealing with those now. They didn't understand when somebody would die and then somebody else would die of the same thing. And they thought, that person who died came back and gave them the disease. Ignorance breeds superstition. So that is where that comes from. Here's your first secret word that you have to write in the thing to tell me that you watched this. The first secret word is bat. Bat. So just in the top of the thing, when you write, before you give me the answers to your questions, write bat. That is the first one. That's how I know that you got this far. Okay, famous vampires in real life, or what vampires legends were based on. Well, Dracula was based on a guy named Vlad Tepes, or Vlad the Impaler. 1400s Wallachian nobleman that was fighting the Turks, and he would take his enemies, and he was known for impaling them, which meant taking a big stick and putting it through your guts, and very tall stick, and as you were sitting there bleeding to death, slowly sliding down the stick, that's what he would do. He was a very bloodthirsty guy, actually a hero to the Wallachians, because he repelled a foreign force by doing god-awful things to them. One of the one of the things he did at his castle, the serfs, the poor serfs who, were starving, and they said, oh, great Vlad Tepes, could you help us? Could you stop us from starving? And he said, yes, I will give you I do the Romanian voice. That's the Romanian voice, which, by the way, Bela Lugosi did naturally, because he was he was Romanian, so when he was Romanian, double jointed, so he could do that kind of thing with his hands, and he had that was the real accent. That was his real accent. So Vlad the Impaler, they had asked him, they said, our people are starving, what could you do for us? He says, oh, I'll invite you to dinner. And he had them all come to dinner and fed them and put them in this big part of the palace and then set them on fire. You're not going to starve if you're dead. You know what they say. Show a man how to start a fire, you'll keep him warm. Set him on fire and he'll be warm for life. Cruel jokes. Another thing he did was, while he had a bunch of people impaled around his room, he would eat his dinner, and anybody who complained about it, they were next up on the pole. Countess Bathory, who would kidnap girls from her village and bathe in their blood to keep herself young. Got away with that for a long time. So there's actually real accounts of basically crazed noblemen doing horrible things, which adds itself to that kind of vampire thing. I guess the fear of these horrible people coming back and doing the horrible things that they did. Book-wise, as you know, most movies are based on books of some sort. Obviously, there's Dracula by Bram Stoker, who is an Irishman. That's kind of like the go-to one. Before that, there was Carmelia, by Sheridan Le Fanu. It was written in 1872. She's a lesbian vampire. For the longest time, I thought all female vampires were lesbians. I don't know. So that's another book. There's a cool movie called The Vampire Lovers. That's that one. Really interesting take on it. There's The Vampire Lestat, which is from the Anne Rice books that go from like 1976. I think she's still even making the novels. I haven't read them in years, or haven't caught up with them. So if you check out Interview with the Vampire or Queen of the Damned, which is on the list of things you can watch, you can check those out. Those are an interesting take on it because they're American vampires. And, well, yeah, American vampires. They go all over the world. But definitely have a kind of gothy lilt to it. Yeah. I know there's also the Count from Sesame Street. But I don't think he bites anybody. I think he just counts things. Famous people that I'd be showing you clips of this if we were together, but I'll put some links. People who played Dracula or are known for playing vampires. There's Bela Lugosi, obviously, is the go-to guy. 1933, directed by Todd Browning, who made Freaks. Bela Lugosi is one of the great horror icons. He is the best Dracula. I'm not even going to argue with this. It's not an opinion, it's true. It's a fact. Bela Lugosi makes the best Dracula. I mean, he is Romanian, he's double-jointed, he goes like this, he has the vampire voice like that. That is his voice. When somebody does the vampire voice like that, they're doing Bela Lugosi. I'll put a picture up, this guy. Put a picture of him. If you watch that one, he has, in that show, you've got the wondrous Dwight Fry, Maniac. The guy who plays the Maniac in every movie. He played Fritz in Frankenstein. If you want a crazy guy, it's Dwight Fry. Crazy guy, Dwight Fry. If you want a maniac, that's him. Look at him. I mean, he can't be anything but crazy. Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee came around in the 50s when Hammer Films in Britain started doing their series of Dracula and Frankenstein. What's great about that is they're all in color. Here's the first vampire that actually had the teeth. They also brought something out. They brought a lot of color to it and a lot of sexuality to it. So, like, you know, a lot of girls in low-cut outfits, a lot of sexy vampire. He's more of a sexy vampire. Christopher Lee, you might know him as Count Dooku or Saruman. He made a big comeback later on in life because everybody liked putting him in movies. He also had a singing career. He was in a metal band, and he would sing. He sang opera. Really interesting character, Christopher Lee. 6'6". Guy was huge. Another person who played, well, not really Dracula. He was in the blaxploitation movie Blackula. William Marshall. Great movie. You know, for something cheesy that's called Blackula, it's actually a very, very, very good movie. And William Marshall also was the king of cartoon. If you watched the Pee-wee's Playhouse, he's Mama Waldy, Blackula. Coppola's Dracula has Gary Oldman as Dracula. Also has Tom Waits as Renfield, which is fun. It's got Keanu Reeves in it, which kind of takes you out of it because it's like, oh, dude, Dracula. My usual rule with Keanu Reeves is the only movies that are good with him have Bill and Ted in the title. I'll take that back for John Wick was good. Yeah. And of course, the wonderful Max Schreck, who just looks like a vampire in Nosferatu, which is the original Dracula film. Okay, and now for your second secret word, bloodsucker. So, that, the second word is bloodsucker, and then I want you to answer these questions. Once again, email me at damage@fdu.edu, and just simple, short paragraphs. You could answer as you watch this film. Think about any similarities between your own life and those of the characters of the film. What does the concept of vampires in the film say about situations in real life? How does the time the movie was made or set in have to do about the world of that time? Maybe if it's set in, the 1800s, it says something about that. If it was made in a newer time, maybe it has something to say about that. Your classwork. After watching the film, just so I know you watched the film, copy and paste the following questions into a document. This is all in that document under the thing. And answer 2 of the 4 in a short paragraph. Don't have to answer all of them, just the 2 that you think you got something to say about. As always, use examples from the film to explain your statement. Don't just say, it was scary. Why is it scary? This. I think this is like this because of this. And put your name, online class number 2, the 2 secret words, in the just put online class number 2 in the subject of your email so I know what the hell it is. And I want that by March 23rd. Anything after that, I ain't grading. And hopefully you people are doing this stuff because, I sent out the email, I contacted everybody, there's 30 of you. And I don't have time to babysit 30 people, so just get on it. Question number 1. What does the concept of vampires in the film say about the situations in real life? Allegories. What is the theme, metaphor, or analogy for the film? What does the time the movie was set in or the time the film was made say about the world of that time? And 4, you can describe a film technique that was used to get a concept in the film across. Now, when I talk about film techniques, for you people who aren't film people, I know like half the class was film people, which is great. That's how was sound used? How was cinematography used? What are the shots? Why did they do this to do this? What does it say? How the effects were used? How does that get the story across? How the pacing was done, how suspense was used. So that's talking about that stuff. So there you go. Stay scared, stay safe, watch a bunch of scary movies because we're all stuck at home and what the hell? It's more fun to watch scary movies than think about the scary stuff outside. So take care. Blah, blah. That's vampire. Blah, blah, blah. I don't say blah. Blah.